All right, it's now 4 o'clock. I will call this meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee to order. I want to remind everyone that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact PEC in capitals at london.ca. First thing I'd like to ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest from the committee. There being none, I just want to pass things over quickly to Mr. Yeoman to make an introduction of a new member of the team that will be coming to planning. Mr. Yeoman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm actually introducing two members of our team tonight. I'm very excited to do so. One is Bruce Page. He's joining us in the subdivisions area as the new manager of development planning. So he's going to be leading the team of planners and ecologists to work through all the subdivision applications that we have. Bruce, you'll probably be familiar with. He's from our parks area before, providing a lot of great leadership there. He's also got a lot of background in application review from some of his other previous roles in the city. So we're very fortunate to have Bruce joining us. The other individual is Peter Kavik, too. He's on the call as well. He's our new manager of development engineering in the subdivisions area as well. So Mr. Felberg now has some additional support in his area, which is great to see. Peter's joining us from transportation planning. He was a transportation planning engineer there, so you probably had some interactions with him as well, and he's going to be a great addition to our team, bolstering our knowledge in that area as well. So he also has some great experience in consulting too. So we're very happy to have them both as part of the development services leadership team.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yeoman, and I'm from the committee. I'd like to welcome both of you. It'll be great to have you with us. Moving on to the consent items, I know we are going to pull item 2.1 and 2.4. Does anyone wish to pull any of the remaining matters? Not seeing any, then I would ask someone to move items 2.2, 2.3, and 2.5, moved by Mayor Holder, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any further comments? Then we'll get the matter up for voting.
Chair, I vote yes.
Chair, I also vote yes.
Voting manually, yes. Everyone else can vote on screen.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. So we'll now go to item 2.1 with 2019 State of the Downtown Report. I think Councillor Lewis wanted to have that matter pulled, so go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I first want to say there's lots of great information in here, although as noted by staff in the report, it is now dated given the COVID-19 situation. That said, my question through you to our staff is actually a very simple one. When I read through this report, items in here touch on pretty much every aspect of work that this council does, whether it's through arts and culture and parks and rec, that goes through community and protective services, or whether it's infrastructure work that goes through civic works, or you know, BIA and business development. Obviously that's a corporate services issue, and planning, which of course would be at this committee. So I'm trying to understand the reasoning why this report comes to us through the planning committee and not actually through strategic priorities and policy committee. When I look at some of the reports that feed into this report, the strategic plan, the core area action plan, and the coordinated informed response, it seems to me like these are actually items that should be reported through SPPC. So I'm just looking for the reason why it comes to us through planning. I think that this is something that all councillors should read. The core and the health of the downtown should be important to all of us in all of our wards, because it's really important to the overall health of the city.
Maybe I'll start with the clerk and indicate why it comes here, since she's largely responsible for that area. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the council procedure bylaw, this is a planning and environment committee agenda item. From time to time, council will direct us to put something to a different committee, but I would need direction from council to do that.
Can I just clarify, would that be something that a motion would be brought at an SPPC meeting or brought here?
Through Mr. Chair, it could be brought here for consideration of council when this matter comes forward in the report.
There you go, Councillor.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for anticipating my next question. And with the answer that the clerk's already provided, colleagues, I think I would like to move that the future reports, and I know that these are biannual, so we won't see another one for a couple of years, but that the future reports of the State of the Downtown report be directed to the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. And I'll see if I've got a seconder for that.
Somebody prepared to second that? Councillor Lehman. So it's moved and seconded, so I'll look for debate on that or any comments on the motion. Just reminding everyone, if it passes today, it'll go on for council, for the full council to consider. Councillor Hopkins? You're on mute, Councillor.
I think I'd learned by now. Thank you. I want to thank staff for this report. It is very informative, and it's important, I agree, that all of council should understand the state of the downtown. I would like to ask a question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, the reasoning why it is at planning, and I'll just wait for my comments after.
Thank you. Who would like to clerk again, or someone else like to take that on? Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as a lot of the information within the report relates to planning type matters, and it has traditionally always been dealt with at PEC. That is the reason, but we're happy to take direction to put it to another standing committee if you wish.
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know, being on planning for a number of years, I always look forward to this report. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, and it's going to become even more important that we understand the importance of downtown. You know, I'm kind of torn with this one, because it is important that at planning, we understand what is going on in the downtown. As you could see, there's a number of projects that relate to the downtown, and it is, I think it would create a bit of a void. I understand where my colleague is coming from, the importance of it going to SPPC. It's hard not to argue that as well, but I would, you know, as a committee member, I would really miss not having the information at committee, given a number of projects that are planned in the downtown core and the importance. And I'm just wondering if there's a willingness that we can sort of do both. If you look at the report, and maybe I can make my comments now, getting the highlights and the updates of Dundas Place, affordable housing, the information that the size of the downtown and the tax levy that we get from that is great. All that information, for me as a committee member, is really important to understand the development of downtown, and we are at planning and environment. So I would really miss not seeing this report. I know the next time we get it will be in 2 years. I also understand that staff are also working with the recovery of downtown. That's going to be ongoing, and that will also be important. So maybe that is a question through you, Mr. Chair, is where is that information going to come forward? Will it be just a planning, or can it go to SPPC as we go through the recovery?
All right. I'll go to the clerk on this. I think the councilor's talking about if there's information that's planning related, does it still come to planning, or can it still come to planning and other information go to SPPC? The motion, just so we're clear, is that the entire report go to SPPC. That's what we're debating on. So I don't know what more you can add.
Through Mr. Chair, it just makes it a lot more complicated for staff, because then they'd have to write two different reports, one that has the planning matters going to PEC and one going to SPPC. So, you know, it has historically and does have planning related matters in it, which is why it goes to PEC. But if you wish it to go to SPPC, that's fine as well. But from an administrative perspective, it would be better if it's one or the other instead of us having to write two different reports.
Great, thank you. Anything further, Councillor?
Yeah, so I can make my comments right now. I think it is important that this report stay at planning. I know all the councillors have an opportunity to read the PEC agenda. And again, this will come to council for further conversation as well. But you know, I would really miss this report not being at planning when it comes to especially affordable housing as it relates to how we develop the downtown. I know we'll get applications through this, but it is a better understanding for me as a committee member to have this report here. So I won't be supporting it.
Mayor Holder?
Well, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the motion that's on the floor, I'm trying to get a sense through the clerk. You indicated in your comments that there were a certain number of items that are planning related, and I think we all acknowledge that that downtown is critically important for this city, and in fact, all of so for all of council to address it in whatever format. So my question through you to the clerk is, over the course of I don't know, let's say a council year, do you have any sense, or is there someone that might be able to respond to what's any sense the number of issues that come in front of planning that would be specific to our committee?
I can go to the clerk. I know Mr. Baird wanted to speak about history of this, but I always worry when it's history. I want to know how far back he's going to go, because if it's like a 40-year history of downtown, we don't want to go there. So, Mr. Barrett, did you want to provide some really useful advice to us?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll try to be very useful. And I'm not going back to the depths of time. This report has been traditionally to Planning Committee because it goes all the way back to 1996. And that's when council first developed a whole set of incentives to begin to deal with downtown revitalization. And that was when council first showed their intent to support the downtown, primarily through financial incentives. When those incentive programs were put in place through the first of the community improvement plans that was done for the downtown, they didn't include monitoring components. And over time, council has been asking, how do we know we're getting a bang for the buck for the investments we've been making in the downtown? And quite simply, that's what this report was first done to do. And the indicators that were in the report and continue to be in the report were those indicators that would show to council the benefits and the impacts of the investments that they were making in the downtown. So the report has traditionally had a very clear and very strong connection to planning and planning committee, because the CIP and all those programs have always come through planning and planning committee. As has been noted over time, the efforts of council in their support of the downtown has grown, and it involves many other service areas and many other things. And there are many other priorities that have come to bear. A big part of downtown revitalization now was and continues to be housing, but an emerging component of that is affordable housing. And that is very often under the purview of another committee. But this report is seen simply as a way where we bring forward some indications, some record of the impacts of all of council's investments and all of council's actions as it relates to downtown revitalization. So that's what the history is behind this, and that's why it comes to this committee, if that's helpful. Certainly, it does reflect and indicates the role of all of the service areas and what they do to support the downtown. And that's what we try to bring forward in this report. But it's not to say that it's only planning committee and planning efforts that have dealt with downtown revitalization. I think this report shows that there are a lot of initiatives that council's brought forward that all are within the rubric or the heading of downtown revitalization.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Barrett, for that clarification. You're right. Downtown is a multifaceted part of our city and very focused geographically, but not in terms of the issues. So what I'm trying to get my best sense in terms of this report is whether it's, and this is where I think Councillor Hopkins is also going, and I'm looking to her experience as well, but that is the notion of where it gets the appropriate attention, knowing that it ultimately goes to council. Because if you imagine this, if it goes to SPPC, this report, and then to council, it's the same players with usually, if I might say, and it depends, but what I appreciate about Planning Environment Committee is the intensity of time and the questions that come into what we have to ask, and it's pretty broad reaching. So through you to Mr. Barrett, I'm trying to get a sense, and maybe based on your experience, and I'm not asking you to come in with a political opinion, so I'll ask you, how well served do you think having this report go through to planning environment in this day and age, knowing that we're dealing with more than just planning issues at this point, notwithstanding the fact that zoning and homelessness and things of that sort are critically important that we deal with at this committee and certainly impact downtown. Do you have any thoughts around that you're comfortable sharing, Mr. Rick?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to caution that again, and I think you've touched on this, if Mr. Barrett's going to weigh in on where this best lies, I think that's the decision that we're being asked to make. So I just want to make sure he keeps it limited.
So, Chair, I'm exceptionally mindful of my words. You've taught me that, and I think I asked if it was well served in this committee, not whether it was better here versus another place.
All right, I just want Mr. Barrett to be cautious. I'm not going to debate this with you. I think you're sort of asking something very similar with the words well served, but I'll let Mr. Barrett make an attempt.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm not trying to take a political statement here, or political stance. The indicators that are in this report, the bulk of those indicators are related to the initiatives that come through the various community improvement programs. And that's what we report out on primarily in this report. Other things, and we noted in this report, for example, Council adopted the Core Area Action Plan in 2019, and there are 70 recommendations just in that one report. Those are going to go forward to various committees, and all of the Core Area Action Plan initiatives are actually already intended and directed to go through SPPC. So those 70 recommendations that cover numerous service areas are all going to be coming back through SPPC. The indicators and the types of things that this specific report measures deal primarily with planning type matters, but where it goes is council's decision. And at the end of the day, the same thing happens. We're reporting out on the measures and the outcomes of the initiatives, the various initiatives that council has taken with respect to the downtown and how they are reflected in the indicators every 2 years.
So finally, then, Chair, through you, my final comment. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. First, I find that useful. It's ultimately going to go to council for its own review and approval at the appropriate times. I'm inclined to keep it at Planning Environment Committee at this time, and depending on this vote, ultimately council is going to decide anyway where it feels it's best served to place this committee. Bottom line, though, when it's done, is that we need to ensure that we are vigilant about downtown in the best interests of the city, and whether it rests with Planning Environment or ultimately SPPC, I think is less the issue, but I think there's sufficient issues that I think the more intense review from Planning Environment makes it useful. So that's where I'm going to put my vote on this. Although I'd like to thank Councillor Lewis for challenging the discussion. I think I find that exceptionally helpful. Thanks.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. The reason I seconded it is, I started looking through this report, and right from the get-go, it struck me as a lot of issues that were being discussed didn't fall into planning. Right from the first sheet where it said noteworthy moments since 2017, talks pretty much about the Core Area Sewer Separation Program, Dundas Place, and Old Oak properties on Richmond Street. The rest of the report, like about half, were items that didn't fall under planning. And as Mr. Barrett said, when this started, it was focused primarily on what could be done through planning. But since council has broadened the scope of what we can do for our core, I believe this report addresses, again, the one thing Mr. Barrett touched on was what's the return for our investment. Regardless of whether it stays in planning or goes to SPPC, council does see it and influences our decision for our investment in the core, as does it for planning purposes. We'll see it when it goes to SPPC, and we'll use this report for decisions we make at this committee. But just given the way this report has morphed into what it is, because we've broadened our scope, I just think the more appropriate place for this to fall would be at SPPC. So that's why I seconded it.
Councillor Van Holst, you wanted to weigh in. I would just ask you to keep in mind you're not a member of the committee. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm hoping we can move this along.
Mr. Chair, I took my hand down because I don't really have comments on where the report goes. I just had a question about the report.
You're now my favorite councillor of the day, so go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, thank you. My question was about the tax differential, how downtown gets so much tax compared to the other places, and just wanted to get a little more detail on that. Is it because it's essentially taller buildings downtown? That's where you put the tall buildings, so they bring in more money, or is because the valuations are so much more than the suburbs say?
So just so I'm clear, are you asking how the downtown generates more tax revenue, or why we spend more downtown? I'm not sure which one you're asking.
Okay, it's the generation of tax revenues.
All right, Mr. Barrett, can you help with that one, or is there someone else?
Through the chair, I'll take the first cut. It's pretty simple. It's because downtown has the highest value of assessed real estate in the downtown. So it's a combination of the high buildings, the concentration of offices. It's the concentration of the real estate, yet these taxes are based on the assessed value.
Okay, thank you. And so if I can follow up, is that mostly because we've got the tall commercial buildings that aren't allowed in other places? Would that be, is that what would even things out if there was the same number of tall commercial buildings in other places?
Mr. Barrett, I think you already answered it by talking about tall buildings, but if you want to take another stab at it.
As I said, it's based on the assessed value. So it's the value of the real estate. So again, it's depending on what is there. There's no prohibition. What can happen all over the city is based on the zoning that occurs all over the city. So for example, the amount of commercial development that can occur at Masonville is akin to the amount of commercial development that could occur in the downtown. So it's what's developed on the ground and what the value of that assessed real estate is.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I found this 2018-2019 report to have lots of happy news in it. I think everybody should write a report about what they did in 2018 and 2019, and they feel better about what happened in 2020. Thanks.
Thank you. Just so you know, in 2018, I ran for re-election. So that's what I was doing.
Right, sorry.
Sorry that I ran for re-election. Sorry. Anybody else on the first round? I don't think there's anybody. I hope we can move towards this is a consent matter, and I'm hoping we can move to a vote on this at some point in time. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully this will actually just end up being my wrap on this item. But Councillor Hopkins' line of questioning, actually, I want to pick up on where she was, because I do want to get an answer from our staff in terms of all the work that's gone into the London COVID-19 recovery network. The action items coming out of those task forces, will they be going to SPPC? Will they be coming to planning? Will they be going to a number of different committees?
Somebody want to answer that question? Yeah, the clerk's going to answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, anything related to, I shouldn't say anything related to COVID. Something that is directly linked to COVID only, under the direction from council, goes to SPPC. There are a number of activities happening that the corporation is undertaking that have some COVID links, but also have links to other committee matters that fall within their jurisdiction. So if it's only about COVID, then it would go to SPPC under council's direction.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that clarity, because I think there's, Councillor Hopkins talked on the importance of the recovery and revitalizing downtown as part of the recovery. And those items are going to be a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them will be continuing from the work that had already been started. Some of them are very specific to COVID-19. Colleagues, with all due respect, and I say this with complete respect, just because it's always landed at planning doesn't mean it has to continue to land at planning. And when we say that it goes on to council eventually anyway, that's true. But I'm also really mindful of the fact that really our work gets done best at committee and then goes to council for a final vote. That's the reason I think that this belongs at SPPC. Councillor Lehman touched on a couple of items. The core sewer separation, really clearly a civic works issue. We've heard a number of people refer to housing and affordable housing. I will point out that tomorrow at Community and Protective Services, an expansion of the head lease program is on the agenda. The last committee agenda had the winter emergency shelter program for the homelessness on the agenda. Those were very clearly items linked to affordable housing and homelessness that did not come through this committee. That's the reason I think that this belongs at SPPC. It's a really good report. I found it to be a really interesting read. That I'm suggesting it land elsewhere, certainly I hope that all the staff who contributed know. The reason I'm suggesting this change is because I think every member of council should not only see this, but they should actually engage in discussion around it at the committee level before things get to council. So that's the reason why I'm advocating for this change. We will see where that goes, but whatever committee it reports to, there's great information in here, and I thank staff for all their work on it. But I do hope that we'll actually share this with all of council through SPPC, where we can have a good debate before the council meeting.
Anybody else, second round? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd just like to thank everyone for their comments. And I do want to maybe just ask the committee members that this report is available to everyone. And I heard loud and clear, the information in this report directly comes from planning, planning matters, community improvement plans. Lots of information in this report comes from planning. And again, I would stress the importance of you're right. Everyone should be able to read this report and make comments, but this is a report that we receive. We receive numerous reports at this committee, and I'm not sure what the difference will be if it goes to SPPC. I think we as a committee will miss a big part of this information when it comes to planning matters. I know we have a number of plans that already go to SPPC, I'm pretty sure, and please correct me if I'm wrong, climate change. There's a lot of overlapping here without a doubt, but this will create a bit of a hole for us committee members understanding the plan as we make decisions on planning matters in the downtown core. To me, it's that simple. So I won't be supporting it.
Anyone else on second round? All right, just to let you know, I'm not going to support this. I have not heard just from the chair, I've not heard a compelling reason why it's going to make a difference, and I'll provide more detail at council because that'll be, I suppose, an interesting debate. So I'll leave it there. Sorry, Councillor Helmer, sorry, I did not see you. That's my fault. Go ahead.
No problem. I wanted to just ask about the report itself. There's a number of residential units that are planned for development. It's outlined in the report. It's something on the order of 1,800 that are sort of in the hopper. And I wonder if planning staff want to weigh in on what they're seeing in terms of the demand for residential units downtown. I know there's lots of activity underway right now, but in terms of the next couple of years, what you think the future looks like. This report I know is a couple of years backward looking, but I think it's a good time to just kind of assess how things are going in terms of residential development. If those 1,800 units came online in the next few years, that'd be a significant increase in the population downtown. I'm just thinking a bit further down the road, the next, say, 3-4 years.
Go ahead, Mr. Barrett. I'll start with you. If you want to send it to someone else, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I believe this probably Mr. Yeoman is in the better position to talk about what's coming down the pipe, the work that his group is doing. And if you want, Ms. O'Hagan can answer any questions on sort of where we've been and what the data is that we've collected.
You've just provided so much useful information today, Mr. Barrett, that I wanted to give you a chance, but I'll go to Mr. Yeoman. Is Mr. Yeoman there? Is he on mute? I think he ran off as soon as he heard you moving that question to him. All right. If Mr. Yeoman's not, if he's not here, Mr. Barrett, it's back to you. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Well, then if any of my development services colleagues can jump in, but I guess the short answer to the councillor's question is, yeah, there's been a lot of activity. We've seen that in some of the applications that have come forward to this committee for zoning bylaw amendments to support new development and increased intensity. And then there would be the things that have already met zoning, but would be going through site plan review process now that are going to be bringing things on. And maybe Mr. Kotzfis or somebody in the DCS folks can tell you the actual numbers right now, because we don't deal with those. Like I said, we can give you the snapshot back, but those DCS folks could tell you what they're seeing.
I think now. I've just been told Mr. Yeoman is back. He was in the penalty box or something. So Mr. Yeoman. Oh, he's not back. Mr. Yeoman?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my apologies. My computer forced a restart on me, even though I started it right before the meeting. So,
oh, great. Did you hear the question?
I did not. My apologies. So, Councillor Helmer, if you wouldn't mind asking the question again, I'm happy to provide any information I can.
What's the future look like for residential demand downtown?
Through you, Madam, Mr. Chair. So we do have a number of applications that are currently in progress. I can't quantify it for you at this moment, but there are a number that are tracking towards being before this committee in the future. So we're seeing still strong, robust demand for construction in the downtown. Another building, the Old Oak Central building that's at Dufferin and Talbot right now, that is nearing construction as well too. So lots of good things coming to our downtown in terms of residential construction.
Thank you.
Councillor, anything further? Thank you. If there's nothing further, we're going to vote on the motion of Councillor Lewis, and I think most of us understand what that is. So I'll call the vote. Voting manually, Councillor Hopkins?
I do have a question. I'm just quickly reading the
well,
motion.
We're now voting. We're voting. I'm sorry, but we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion loses 4-2.
Thank you. We'll move on then. I think we need a motion to receive and file the report. Someone could do that for me, please. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by someone. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. It's moved and seconded, so unless there's anything further, I'll call the vote.
Councillor Hopkins.
I'm still waiting for it to load, but I will vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. We'll move now to item 2.4, which is the application with regard to 307 Fanshawe Park Road. And I think Councillor Hopkins had some questions on that, so I'll turn it over to her.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know we've all received a number of correspondence from the community with their concerns. And I think it's, my understanding is that this application has been approved, and we right now are looking at removing 3 holding provisions, and that is something that staff have recommended, that we can remove the 3 holding provisions that have been met. I do think that given the concerns that we've heard from the community, I would like to make ask a few questions through you, Mr. Chair, to staff for the community's information, because as you know, this was quite contentious. It went through extensive public participation meetings and conversations within the community. And I understand that council did support the site plan application, subject to keeping a number of trees, 6 of them in fact. And I do want to ask staff, given that one of these trees, number 31, is at risk, I would like staff to respond to the justification of the removal of these trees, of that tree, and the understanding that the rest of the trees the council asked to be retained will be retained.
Thank you very much. I think staff is aware of the question, so I'll just ask whoever was going to answer could go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Heather McNeely speaking. I'll respond to the question. I just want to also reiterate, this is a matter of the removal of holding provision, the report that's before you. So I'll speak to those first before I speak about the trees. So under the H89 that was required for a stormwater servicing report, and some of these questions also came up at the public site plan meeting in July. And city staff have accepted the approach to design of the stormwater management system, and it will be implemented through the servicing drawings on the through the engineering drawings. The H54 was the requirement for a noise assessment report, and it has been prepared, and the recommendations have been incorporated as special provisions in the development agreement. The H5 was the public site plan meeting, and it was held on July 15th of 2020. The applicant has entered into a development agreement, and that was completed on January 4th of 2021. And so for that reason, administration is satisfied that each of the holding provisions have been addressed, and therefore providing the recommendation to proceed with the lifting of the holding
Ms. McNeely,
that's before you tonight.
You're breaking up a little bit in terms of
specific requests concerning the trees, and there was a
Ms. McNeely, you're breaking up.
Ms. McNeely, can you hear us?
No, there's definitely something wrong with the internet connection. So if Ms. McNeely isn't available, I don't know if someone else.
Yes.
Oh.
I can hear you.
Yeah, you're breaking up in terms of speaking to us. I certainly can't understand what you're saying at this point in time. All right, is there someone else can answer the question so that we can?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can, hopefully Ms. McNeely's internet will be back with her as well.
Sure.
So Quite a bit of work's been done here through the application review process to try to mitigate the impacts on the trees and to retain as many trees as possible on the site. That's something that staff had prioritized and council, of course, prioritized, as Councillor Hopkins indicated, as part of the review. The building, for example, has been shifted. The rear building's been shifted more towards Fanshawe Park Road East through the application review to create more landscaped open space and to provide more opportunities for tree cover as well. Several parking spaces on the site from the original proposal have also been removed to encourage the further retention of trees and to stabilize the root systems for trees as well over time. One tree in particular, though, that I think the councillor has indicated is going to unfortunately have to be removed. It was determined to be a hazard tree through the review of the tree report by the city's arborist. Unfortunately, the tree is going to not be viable in the long term and may have health and safety implications to the residents of the property in the future. So at this point, we're looking at removing that tree through the development process.
Thank you very much. So that's your first question. Next question, Councillor.
And with that, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Yeoman. And it's unfortunate that Ms. McNeely we were unable to hear what she was saying, but I would assume therefore the rest of the trees are planned to be retained then. And I think that's important since it was council's direction that we do that. And I would like confirmation as well about what will be when we move forward with this, the measures for the tree protection plan and the sediment control will still need to, those measures still need to be done. And I just want confirmation of that because I know the community is a little, I guess, you know, they really don't know what to expect now. And I would like to take this opportunity to give them some information on the process moving forward, in particular with the tree protection plan. And that would be my last question.
Okay, can we get an answer to that?
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, prior to a building permit, the tree protection measures and the sediment erosion control measures will have to be in place to ensure that there aren't any impacts to neighboring properties and also to make sure the trees are protected and preserved as well. Unfortunately, there was some site activity that did occur on site back in December. That was unfortunate and was without permission from the city and it was immediately rectified and addressed through city staff, through our inspection staff. So we'll be ensuring that that doesn't happen in the future, and the developer is quite aware of that and eager to ensure that does not happen as well.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor.
Yeah, if I could just sum it up, I really want to thank staff for all the work that they've been dealing with, given all that's happening and getting the information to the community. It still remains, there's many privacy issues, as you could see from the correspondence that we received about the buffering, it's going to be a massive impact to this community, and I would like to encourage the applicant to work with the community, and the community to work with the applicant in understanding this project as it moves forward, to do what is best and have an understanding of where we are. And again, I think it's really important that we all know as a committee that we are just removing these 3 holding provisions that are in the report. And I am supportive of doing that because of the work that has had to be done leading up to the removal of these holding provisions, and staff have made their comments in the report.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on item 2.4? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hopkins, for asking some of those questions already. I'm just seeking some clarification here, particularly around the removal of the H5, and especially hearing that activity has already taken place on site without a permit and without permission from the city to do so. And I'm particularly aware that, and perhaps Mr. Barrett, or if Mrs. McNeely is able to be back on the call, if tree number 14 on the site plan, that was raised as one that residents felt was particularly at threat. And I'm just wondering if it's appropriate to leave the H5 in place until the site plan concerns around the tree protection zones have been addressed.
I think Ms. McNeely is back, and hopefully she heard that question, so if she could answer that. Okay, that's my last try.
We'll try.
Oh,
sorry,
there.
Mr. Chair. We'll try this again, and my
Okay.
apologies.
No
My
need to
call has dropped.
apologize.
For tree number 14, there's about a 6-meter separation there, and we are working for ensuring that there's protection measures in place. So there's another tree 21. There is going to be more impact for that one, and that's why we remove some parking spaces. In this case, for tree number 14, there is an actual servicing easement that goes in between for the sanitary between the two lots. And in that case, there's going to be some construction activity in that area. There's going to be trenching, more hand digging type of work to be done as well to make sure that the tree roots will be protected. But there will be impact to those tree roots. And we anticipate about a 30% impact to those tree roots. And that is construction that will have to occur. Now, having said that, there is consent letters with the neighboring properties that have to be entered into, and that's also part of the site plan process.
Thank you. Councillor? That's it. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation of removing the holding provisions? We don't have a mover. Oh, the mayor is, I don't have him on my screen.
You missed me more than once, but that's all right,
Oh,
Chair.
you're there now, larger than life, Mr. Mayor. Are you prepared to move this?
I'll move it.
All right. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hillier is seconding it. That's great. So it's moved and seconded. Anything further? Calling the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Moving on now to our only scheduled item, item 3.1. I will need a motion to open the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any comments? There being none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Presenting, Ms. Wise?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's me.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, committee. Before I begin my overview, there is a slide deck available as item 3.1B on the city's website or on page 195 and 196 of the revised agenda. So if any members of the public or planning committee are interested in following along with some visuals. The application Z9155 before you is for the development of a 24-story mixed-use apartment building through a site-specific bonus zone. This is located at the corner of Dundas Street and Hewitt Street in the Oldies Village. Slide 1 shows the subject site as a portion of the larger landholding, which currently accommodates 3 existing apartment buildings of 21 to 24 stories in height. The subject site is referred to as Phase 3 and is shown in red. Slide 2 shows the rendering of the proposed development at the corner of Hewitt Street and Dundas Street in relation to the existing buildings on site, which are shown in white and oriented to King Street. Slide 3 shows the site plan for the proposed development, which includes a 4-story podium that steps back to a 6-story podium along Dundas Street, a landscape terrace on the 5th floor roof as an amenity area, and the 24-story portion of the tower in an L-shaped configuration with a building step back above the 22nd story. Slide 4 shows a comparison of the proposed or revised building design and the initial or superseded building design. Some notable changes include a reduced tower floor plate, There's less of an L-shaped projection. There's more of a step back now from Dundas Street. And there's also a change in the overall podium design and height from 4 stories to 6 stories to accommodate additional parking within the structure. Slide 5 shows the Dundas Street facade. And on the ground floor, there are commercial uses proposed. There's parking located above the ground floor in the podium and residential units that wrap the parking structure to provide activation of the street. The property to the west of the proposed development, or to the right on the slide, is a heritage designated property, and the podium design provides step backs along the building edge to provide a more sensitive transition and to minimize the massing here. Slide 6 shows the Dundas Street frontage at street level, which includes a continuous commercial streetscape with a high proportion of brick and glass. There's approximately 900 square meters of commercial gross floor area, which is divided into numerous bays that is reminiscent of the existing development pattern along Dundas Street. Slide 7 shows the corner treatment of Dundas Street and Hewitt Street. This is activated by an entrance for the podium residential units, and overall well designed to showcase the corner feature. Slide 8 shows the Hewitt Street facade. It also shows the extent of the tower step back from Dundas Street, which is at 26 meters. There is vehicular access for parking within the podium located from Hewitt Street, and another vehicle access ramp located off the interior laneway, shared with the larger landholding leading to the underground parking. And there is a total of 393 parking spaces proposed overall. And finally, slide 9, this is the corner of the proposed building along Hewitt Street and the internal laneway. And this is where the entrance is for the majority of the residential units. So during the application review process, we heard from many of the residents in the area, and we were fortunate to have held a community information meeting last February before the impacts of COVID. I'd like to thank the assistance we received from the Old East Village Community Association, and especially the BIA, who helped coordinate the community information meeting as well as the feedback. The result was very detailed comments, both in favor and in opposition to the application for a variety of aspects that has helped shape the final outcome. Looking briefly to the policy framework, the site is located within an area of the city that contemplates higher densities and height through policies in the 1989 official plan, the Old East Corridor special policy, the London plan, Old East Village segments, and then most recently in the Old East Village Dundas Street Corridor secondary plan. The proposed building height of 24 stories is achieved through a bonus zone. That includes an enhanced urban design, underground parking, and the provision of 13 affordable housing units for a period of 30 years at 80% of the average market rent. So in conclusion, the proposed development is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the various official plan policies, is well designed and appropriate for the site and the surrounding area. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wise. Technical questions from the committee? Councillor Lewis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick one. Of the 393 parking spaces in this proposal, do we have a sense of what number would be publicly available? I mean, when we have ground floor commercial, of course, there's a necessity for people to sometimes access that ground floor commercial by vehicle. So is there an opportunity for the public to do that in this case, or are these parking spaces currently proposed specifically for the residential units? I do note that there's a surplus between the unit count and the parking count.
Go ahead, Ms. Wise.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is parking that would be set aside to satisfy the requirements of the commercial uses at the ground floor. So that would have to be located somewhere within the structure. However, a lot of the parking that's provided is in an effort to alleviate some of the pressure on the local parking demand, which is also created through the existing apartment buildings. So it is anticipated that a large amount of them would be taken up by residents that are in the existing apartment buildings, as well as the future proposed phase for your consideration.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to ensure that some consideration to the commercial parking space need was being given, and I hear that it is. I don't need an exact number. I'm just glad to hear that that's been part of the discussion.
Any other technical questions? I just have one, Ms. Wise, and it's about something, the podium, the whole aspect of the podium. And it's something that seems relatively new from my point of view in the City of London. And I'm really interested in how the community input and sort of design principles went into the podium here, which seems to me to be fairly extensively designed and to be fairly large.
To you, Mr. Chair. So I believe the podium design evolved both directly and indirectly through the comments we received. Some of the direct changes, there was a desire for the first design to have more of a horizontal feature that connected the vertical brick features. So that's something we heard from the community as well as the urban design peer review panel. And in terms of material type, those things also were improved. The indirect inclusion could be the additional height that's associated with including more parking levels. We did hear that the existing parking situation is an issue, and in order to accommodate more parking, the podium did rise 2 levels. But the overall design, I think, captures a lot of comments that we received. And provided a better interface with Dundas Street.
Thank you very much. I think that's, just from my point of view, that's a real positive, the podium aspect. So moving on now to public.
Question, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I keep missing you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize for that. Go ahead.
Thank you. To our staff, I noted the detail around bonusing, and obviously as a result of what is occurring going forward is more inclusionary zoning. So how does bonusing get into it at this point when it hasn't broken ground? What was I'm just trying to understand the dates associated with when we're allowed to bonus and when inclusionary zoning takes place. Could you just help me understand that timing and how it affects this particular project?
Go ahead, Ms. Wise, or someone else if they're able to answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the timing of this application, it has been active for the past year, which means the policy framework that was in place when this came in did contemplate bonusing and still does contemplate bonusing. There will be an eventual phasing out and a transition time over the next couple of years up to about September 2022, where aspects like inclusionary zoning may come in and take the place of some other projects that may have been dealt with through bonusing. And in keeping in mind that the bonusing that was eventually sort of negotiated is also aligned with our future provision of priorities. So it's something that we would have liked to see if bonusing goes away. I hope that helps, sorry.
Well, it does, and if I might, Chair, this is the staff, but I'm glad to see that as a part of that process, negotiated or otherwise, that it includes 13 affordable housing units within that sorely needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're going to go to public participation now, unless there's any other technical questions. I know that people will be joining us, and I don't know if they're listening now. Are they? Just anyone who's going to be speaking, just so you're aware, 5 minutes. We'll be timing that, and we'll try to give you notice when there's 30 seconds left. But we do hold to that time limit to move the meeting along. And in terms of comments, we try to stay away from any derogatory comments about other speakers or anything in particular. It makes the meeting proceed a lot smoother. So I'll go to, is the applicant here to make? The applicant is here? Can't hear me.
Mr. Blackwell, you need to take your phone off mute, please. *6, I believe, will unmute you.
Mr. Blackwell, are you there? Yeah, I'll go to the next person. We'll come back to the applicant. So Next speaker, whoever that might be. This is going well so far.
This is Dr. Grzib.
Doctor? Hello?
Again, anyone joining us by phone needs to unmute their phone by using *6.
Oh, there's somebody who must be on. Who am I speaking to?
This is not the applicant. It's Amanda Jibb from Western and Unity Project, but I think I should probably be speaking after the applicant.
No, we're not going to wait. You're going to go now.
Okay.
You have
great.
5 minutes. Go
the
ahead.
first one to unmute my phone.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for making it possible to participate in this meeting. I have been on every kind of online format possible, but this one is new, calling into a Zoom meeting. So my name is Amanda Jibb. I'm a professor at Western University, and I'm also chair of the board of directors for Unity Project for Relief of Homelessness in London, which, as you know, is an emergency shelter located at 717 Dundas Street, which is directly beside the proposed development. And that is the heritage building to which the speaker referred to earlier. A little bit later, my colleague Rick Odegaard, who's also a longtime member of Unity Project's board of directors, will speak to outline some specific concerns that we have related to rezoning and bonusing provisions in the application, including density, height, setback from Dundas, and setback in particular from the property line next to our facility. But I would like to just speak briefly to Unity Project's main concern. And this is related to the proposed number of affordable rental units in the apartment building. I was really heartened to hear the discussion earlier in this meeting about the issues of homelessness and affordable housing. We're certainly facing a crisis in the city, and this is one that will be exacerbated by the economic impacts of COVID-19 once this is all over. I think we're going to be dealing with this for years to come. And all of us have seen a growing number of people who are sleeping rough in the city. And of course, we're very supportive of the recently enacted emergency measures to prevent people from freezing to death on the streets over the winter. At Unity Project, for more than a decade, our staff and program participants have been experiencing the impacts of this housing crisis, and we experience it every single day. Our housing stability workers struggle to find affordable rentals for our program participants, and we know that there's an acute shortage of affordable and supportive housing in the city. Based on the reports, and I heard this reiterated in the overview, Medallion's proposal includes 13 rental units that will be leased at 80% of the average market rent for 30 years. And so the first question that I think we would like to ask is whether apartments at 80% of the average market rent in London can really be characterized as affordable. So would somebody who's working for minimum wage or someone on ODSP or OW really be able to afford a unit in the new Medallion building? The second question is whether 13 units is enough. Is it going to make an impact or really any kind of dent in the affordable housing crisis that we're dealing with? Should we be asking for more? The third question, and this is not really a rhetorical question, it's an actual question. How many affordable units were lost when Medallion began to develop those properties? So is the 13 units replacing the number of affordable housing units that were displaced? Were there more? Were there less? I think this is an important question to ask. And then finally, we would like to ask the committee to consider what the ethical obligations are of for-profit housing developers like Medallion. And Medallion, I would note, is a for-profit company based outside of our city, right? They're based in Toronto. What are their ethical obligations to contribute to collective local solutions for affordable housing and for addressing this crisis in our community. Should they be doing more, particularly when they are not even based in London, they're based in Toronto. So I think the main point we would like to make is that in exchange for a compromised rezoning of the area, and Rick is going to outline those details a little bit later, taking into account some concerns we have about setback and density, Unity Project would like to ask the committee and the city for a much more robust affordable housing provision in this proposal. And we would propose a minimum of 30 rent geared to income units, not 80% of market rent, but rent geared to income units.
You're now, just so you know, sorry, you're at 30, you have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, so hopefully, and that's actually the last point I wanted to make. So 30 rent geared income units for at least 100 years. We really welcome more rental units in the city. We need them, but we believe the city should take a really holistic, strategic, and ethical approach to affordable housing, particularly in relation to for-profit developers and developments that are situated outside of our own city. So thanks so much for listening to our concerns, taking them into account, and for your time and the ability to participate in this meeting. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. So now we are going to try to go to the applicant. I'm hoping the applicant is online. Unmuted.
Mr. Codd, you're now in the meeting. If you could unmute your phone, please.
Okay, I'm not going to, we're going to wait. Do we have someone else who is able to enter the call, please? All right, who's on the line?
It's Luca Cott from Medallion Developments.
All right, welcome. You have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes.
We're trying to get a hold of Brian here. Brian is supposed to provide the presentation on our behalf. But I just wanted to say good afternoon to all of you and all to the members of the public that are in attendance. My name is Luca Cott. Like I said, I'm here on behalf of Medallion Developments. Just wanted to quickly show my appreciation to staff.
Sir, just before we go on, I just want to remind you, you have 5 minutes, and we will be holding to that, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. So go ahead.
Thank you. And so I just wanted to show my appreciation to the staff and to the community at large. We worked very hard together to develop this project. I think we all could be proud of and satisfied with it. I'm here just observing all the committees and public's comments, and I hope that we address most of the concerns as it relates to the project, and I think through Brian's presentation, we'll be able to do so. Thank you.
All right, we're hoping to hear from Brian. We're trying,
I think. Give him a call after this.
All right, thank you. The next person. Is someone else on the line?
Ms. Velasco, you're now online.
Ms. Velasco? It seems to me that there's people are not muting, and if anybody's listening, you really have to unmute before we can hear you. May sound straightforward. Who is on the line?
Ms. Velasco, you are unmuted, but we are unable to hear you.
Oh, because I'm not saying anything. Can you hear me now?
Yep. As always, Ms. Velasco, you have 5 minutes, and we'll let you know when there's 30 seconds remaining.
Hi, sorry. I just have to shut down.
People are not muting, and if anybody's listening, you really have to unmute before we can hear you.
I just have to shut down. I am Anna Maria Velasco. Hello?
We're here, Ms. Velasco. We are waiting for you to start speaking.
Okay. I don't agree that.
Ms. Velasco, you need to turn the volume off on your computer.
Okay, everything is ready to go now. I apologize. It's a little bit awkward.
Okay, please just go ahead. Just go ahead.
I don't agree that this development deserves a bonus zone. Bonus zones are to be awarded in exchange for unique or extraordinary features. including enhancing community character. Developers, it's become a custom for developers to ask for bonus zones for any development that's not a square box. There's nothing special about this development architecturally or design, and it does not complement in any way the heritage features of the adjacent building or character of the streetscape of Old East Village. This development should only be awarded a bonus zone if they house the current residents that will be displaced at their current rental rate, because market value is unaffordable to many working and underemployed individuals. That's the problem. Market value is unaffordable because the market is targeted towards upscale housing where the developer can make the most money. There's little value in setting aside a small fraction of units at market value if the people displaced by the development can't afford it. It's important to understand the housing problem properly. There's a housing problem because the only housing being built is high-end housing, and this raises the market value for all housing. Therefore, residents that are being displaced by this development need new units at their current rental rate. That would be deserving of a bonus zone. The drawings of the building along Dundas and Hewitt streets have no space for street trees or green space, except in concrete boxes. We have already been there, done that, and now know that trees and concrete boxes cannot thrive and die. They become sickly and only make the street more derelict. There is no green space on site for residents. I feel there's a lack of sensitivity or maybe understanding at council as to the importance of ensuring ample green space for residents in the race to build. It is well understood that developers must make room for green space for residents as part of the overall health of their living space and broader community. If this means a reduction in either rental units or size of some rental units, then so be it. It's not acceptable that in your race to build, you compromise components that define healthy living. Otherwise, you're creating a concrete jungle, and more progressive communities have moved away from that sort of planning. The tower is too high. Combined with the existing towers on King Street, it will block crucial sunlight for the low-rise housing on Hewitt. Those residents will only receive early morning sun, which will eliminate their ability to grow food if desired, and place the rest of the day in shadow. No bonus zone should be awarded for eliminating the vast majority of sunlight to residents. Finally, there is nothing special about this development. Architecturally, it is plain. Other than providing housing, it has a negative impact on the community. It blocks significant sunlight to adjacent low-rise housing, is not complementary to the adjacent heritage building or the character of Old East Village. It provides no interior green space to its residents. It contributes and doesn't contribute to the tree canopy of the area. It evicts current residents and does not offer substitute housing at their current affordability. In closing, I just feel like the city needs to set a higher bar for what a developer can get a bonus zone for. I don't understand what we're afraid of to make sure that future development encompasses all the qualities that make a living in the core or anywhere healthy and vibrant. And this is just another concrete block in the middle of a great community. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your input. Appreciate it. All right, who is on the line? Oh, we're waiting for our next speaker.
Mr. Odegaard, you're now on.
Mr. Odegaard, are you there?
Mr. Odegaard, if you could hit *6, that will unmute your phone.
Mr. Odegaard, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
All right, Mr. Odegaard, as I indicated to others, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and we will give you we will let you.
I don't understand.
Ms. Velastro?
Okay, can you wait for a moment, sir?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And Ms. Velastro, is your phone still on?
She was coming through just fine when I was.
Okay, I think we're okay.
No, we were hearing her in the background, sir.
All
right, Mr. Odegaard, you have 5 minutes if you'd like to start.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As Dr. Jib mentioned, I'm a longtime volunteer with the Unity Project as well, the next door neighbor to this development. I'm the current treasurer of the project. I first of all wanted to thank Sonia Wise for her complete and speedy responses to all of our questions that we've fired at her. A lot of organizations are taking a long time and blaming COVID on it, but not she. Thank you. I want you to know that we are in favor of commercial and residential development on the street. We do have some issues with this particular proposal, though, and as it relates to now the new design, I am not familiar with. I am operating off of the renderings that were sent out a few weeks ago, so I have not seen the updated design, and I cannot comment on it other than to say that the previous design, we like the setback, but we do not like the tower height. The shadow line that was mentioned by the previous caller, for existing buildings, our own building, which is like a 2.5-story century duplex, the shadow line goes halfway up the buildings on the other side of Dundas Street right now. This development, the shadow lines are going to probably extend all the way across Queens Ave. The existing zoning on the corner property permits 12 stories with a density of 250 units per hectare. What they are asking for is double the height and triple the density. It's a density that exceeds even the King Street development, and we're wondering why, when you want to have a friendly frontage on Dundas Street, a busy Dundas Street, you would allow something that's going to loom over the street like a 24-story building with that kind of density. So the design the density is, we think, too high. The parking spaces, in terms of bonusing, I don't understand why this 393 parking spaces is a response to the market demand for parking. It's why are we bonusing? Because they are providing parking. They need to provide parking to rent their units and to satisfy the lack of parking on the existing buildings on King Street. The affordable housing issue Amanda dealt with does a 5% of the units in affordable housing warrant a bonusing provision. We would like to be involved in the site plan approval stage. We're concerned about the side yard setback. Currently, the zoning calls for 4.5 meters up against our property. We hope that that is going to be the case. The rezoning requests 0 to 4.5. I don't know where that 0 is happening. I haven't seen anything that shows it on our side. And we have one final item, which may seem minor, trivial to you, but it's significant for us, and that is when Medallion first built King Street, they agreed to allow a garbage bin on their property adjacent to our property for our use. We have a very tight site. Garbage bin would be really disruptive. We don't know where that fits into the new development. Is that indeed, even if that's going to be continued. So that's it. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Odegaard. We'll try to get your questions answered as part of this, the presentations today. Next is the applicant, I hope, finally, or the applicant's representative. Oh, okay. And who's on the line now?
Ms. Pistorius from Old East.
Ms. Pistorius?
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, I was just getting my tech situation.
I was just going to comment on how much better this goes for the mayor. I don't know what's going on here. I think he has more influence than I do, but that should be obvious. So, Ms. Pistorius, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I appreciate your patience. Yeah, so my name is Jen Pastorius. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm from the Old East Village BIA. And generally, I have to say, as Sonia mentioned, we held one of our very last in-person meetings on February the 2nd, 2019, to speak to this project. Generally speaking, I would say the community was generally positive about the idea of development, but our community is also very attentive to details, so they had quite a bit of detailed feedback, concerns, as well as suggestions. And in the more recent renderings, it seems to suggest, and in conversations with City of London urban designer, that most of the challenges around or concerns around public around urban design have been addressed for example, the height of the transom windows, which would reflect the heritage components of other buildings in the area, has been addressed. The setback is farther back, and it kind of agrees with the cadence of the other three and 4-story buildings in the general area, and the parking was addressed as well, which was a concern that was brought to the table, and the number of parking spaces is a response to that concern. Generally speaking, the design of the property as it stands now, as presented tonight, we're pleased with the commercial spaces. We think it's of benefit to the community. It will connect the commercial area from English into the western part of the corridor, and also to an increase of residential units are always beneficial, in addition to the affordable housing component to the project. Regarding the parking, again, like I said, we had a lot of concern around parking. There's a current parking, some would say, crisis in the area regarding Medallion residents. So the increase in parking comparatively to units was a positive development. However, we won't really know how well this remedy has worked until the building is built and the people are in the parking spots to see whether or not that is actually enough. The community itself also had some other concerns that were, to be honest, outside the scope of this particular application, but were included in the planning participation meeting, so I wanted to include them here. Those are related to ongoing maintenance of the building itself, both exterior and interior. Also, there was a connectivity piece that was promised in phase 1 by Medallion in order to create a commercial building as well as a walkway to connect residents from the buildings themselves on King Street directly to Dundas. That has not happened, and so we're hoping to work with Medallion to move forward to ensure that these kind of developments do manifest in the near future. So I just, in closing, generally speaking, I would say, in relation to the comments that were made on February 2nd, that the adjustments have been made to remedy many of the concerns that people had around urban design. Parking, I think it's a cautious optimism situation, and again, we're excited about further development in the area and hope to work with Medallion in the future to remedy some of the ongoing challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hate to say this, but do we have the applicant now?
Mr. Blackwell, if you could hit *6, please.
it is important that we hear from somebody, from the applicant, but this is sort of the third or fourth time I think we've tried this exercise. If we took a brief adjournment, would that help, or would it? Is it all right if we take just a 5-minute adjournment to see if we can make sure that the next person, is there anyone else besides the applicant? No. So that's the next person. So if it's all right with committee, I don't think we can skip the applicant. So Councillor Lewis is moving. Someone second a 5-minute adjournment. Councillor Hopkins, just show of hands. All in favor? I think everybody's supporting. So we'll take 5 minutes to get the applicant online.
Mr. Blackwell, can you hear us? Mr. Blackwell, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can. We're still in recess, so don't mute. Just if you could just hold on and remain silent.
Yeah, no problem at all. So
Okay.
you could hear me right now?
Yes,
Kathy?
we can, but if you could
Okay.
now remain silent until we're back into session,
Yeah,
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Mr. Blackwell, we can hear any conversation in the background, so you may want to make sure there is no background conversation.
Okay, we're going to go back in session, call the meeting to order, and I am assured that Mr. Blackwell is on the line.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Now, I just want to remind you, you have 5 minutes. Did you listen to the other presentations?
Yes, I've been having technical issues with my computer, and I think I've heard most of it.
Okay, I didn't know.
Apologize if I've missed them.
Okay, if you wanted to address any of those concerns, I would be fine. Otherwise, I will give you your 5 minutes. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will get right to answering some of the questions that were asked. Number one, I just wanted to start by thanking staff for all their help on this application. I'd like to say that the secondary plan allows for 24 stories. I want to start with that. I want to indicate to all staff that the underlying zone for this area is BD zone. So it allows for this type of development. There was a talk about HDC. We've had a few meetings with HDC, Mr. Chairman, and the numbers that we've proposed and they've approved is based on the latest approval, development approvals that have been approved lately by planning staff. So the 13 units and the breakdown has been reviewed by HDC and has been approved. Someone was talking about the bonusing. Yes, the affordable 13 units, affordable units that was approved by HDC is part of the bonusing. And, you know, there was other elements, i.e. the building design and the underground parking. That is part of your London plan and the original OP requirements. So I wanted to let you know that. We did have a meeting with, we did have one open house meeting, and we did have a meeting with senior staff in the Oldies Village. And we believe that, you know, at that meeting, there was a lot of discussions regarding the building. Mr. Chairman, I want to let you know that we've changed the building 4 times. We've worked with your urban design planner. He was at the open house. He was at all the meetings. He was at the urban design panel. He has taken all those comments that he's heard, and we worked with him to get to this stage. So we have looked at that, Mr. Chairman. Regarding parking, we have added an extra 90 parking spaces to this development, just to this phase development, because we know that we have issues with parking on the site. So just for this phase, we've added an extra 90 parking spaces. Mr. Chairman, regarding the access of Hewitt Street, we hired our transportation engineer to work with staff engineering department. So we have, with the discussions that we've had and our modeling, we've proven to staff that the access of Hewitt Street is appropriate from a setback from Dundas Street. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to be very clear regarding the building. When we were dealing with the urban designer, we looked at the building massing, we looked at the elevations, we looked at the setback of the point towers, we looked at the podium fronting onto Dundas Street. You know, we went into detail on the height of the glass fronting onto Dundas Street, which is 15 feet. So we went to that type of detail. Mr. Chairman, we looked at materials. You know, your urban designer, we are close to the Unity project, and he asked us to provide setbacks, which we did. We went to Latch. Latch had no issue regarding the heritage look of our building. We did do an HIA regarding the zoning, which there was no issues regarding your staff related to the heritage component. Mr. Chairman, we do have a garbage bin for the Unity project on our property. We are still going to carry that forward. In our design, we will have a bin, and I could say that very clearly. We will have a bin for the Unity project. They will go through their fence. We will provide that access to our garbage area in the new building, and they will have.
Could you wrap up, sir? You're just hitting 5 minutes.
Okay. So I just wanted to explain this application. We have worked with city staff for a little over a year now on this application. We feel that we fulfilled most of the concerns in the community, and you know, we're happy to build this next phase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there any other public participation? I understand there are no other public participants, so I will need a motion to close the public participation meeting. That's moved by Councillor Lewis. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hopkins. So we'll call the vote on closing the public participation meeting unless there's further comments. Thank you very much. Prior to comments and questions from the committee, I did jot down some of the concerns that were raised by participants, and there has been some response from the applicant, but perhaps our staff could just address those, if that's all right. So the first is the affordable housing. There were concerns raised about the number of units, what the market rent would be, how many affordable units were lost when Medallion built, and why isn't there much more robust affordable housing like 30 units. So I don't know if the applicant answered that question. I don't know if staff can help with that area. Ms. Wise, someone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might start. For bonusing applications, each site and each proposal is unique, so they don't look the same. In this case, this is a higher density area of the city, so the starting point is more of a high-rise expectation. So the current zoning does allow for heights of about 12 to 15 stories. So the difference in height is what the bonusing is based on. In this case, the applicant did work with our Housing Development Corporation to find a suitable number of units at an appropriate average market rent for a number of years. We think that this is satisfactory as part of the overall request. The bylaw itself is also written in a way that those affordable housing units can be deployed in the existing units that are already on the ground. So it satisfies an existing demand potentially in that respect. Thank you.
The next there was some comment about shadow lines that could impact the area. Do you have can you help us with that at all?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So shadows are mitigated by things like the size of the tower, the setbacks of the tower, the location of the tower. So in this case, the secondary plan encourages a very slim tower floor plate. That means that less of the building massing would create shadows. It encourages floor plates of less than 1,000 square meters. This is just over at 1,075 square meters. So the actual size of the tower can help mitigate how much shadow it casts. There's also appropriate setbacks from Dundas Street specifically being the main corridor. So the closest portion of the tower is 25 meters or 26 meters from Dundas Street. And that separation distance helps provide the additional mitigation. There is the shadow study that's appended to the report for more detailed illustration. And then also the separation distance between towers. So there are already existing shadow generators on site, and the proposed tower is sufficiently set far away enough from those existing towers that it helps ensure that sunlight can go through.
All right. There was also a question about the density of the building as exceeding the King Street development, in fact, and a suggestion about the height of the building. Can you help with that?
I'm not sure specifically, sorry, Mr. Chair, which King Street, is that the existing buildings on site?
I assume so, but I'll just ask you maybe to comment on the density, this building and its height.
Okay, to you, Mr. Chair, the density for part of the site that's in the same zoning as the rest of the Medallion development currently is around 600 units per hectare. A portion of the site is in a different zone. That's the part closest to Hewitt Street. That has a density maximum of about 250 units per hectare. So the request is going from the majority of the site, which is in 600 units per hectare, up to 750 units per hectare. And that would be sort of shared for the entire development site, including the existing buildings. And the height, the height of the development is proposed at the very top of the potential height allowed in the secondary plan. Generally, the heights for this area in the secondary plan would be up to about 12 stories without bonusing, and then from 12 to 24 stories with bonusing.
All right. And lastly, there was some discussion about parking spaces and why there was bonusing for that. The applicant did address it, but perhaps you could provide, if there's anything additional, you could provide it.
Mr. Chair, the parking spaces, the underground parking mention is basically associated with where this application fits into the policy framework. So at the time this application came in, the secondary plan was not 100% in full force and effect, and the London plan was also still under appeal. So it still could take advantage of the 1989 official plan, which listed underground parking as a potential bonusable item. So that is why it is included in there. It is more of a design aspect to have a lower podium with underground parking than a higher podium, including the same number of parking spaces. But that's why there was reference to it.
Thank you very much. I hope that helps the committee. I just wanted to clear up those points. And I'll turn the matter over to the committee for questions, and maybe we'll do questions first and then comments after. So any questions? All right, comments then from the committee?
Sorry, Chair, you missed me again.
Well, it's not intentional. I promise you that, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead.
I'm sure it isn't. Question then, if I can, for staff. Just to help me understand, to have 12 stories that were all part of the application to go to 24 as a result of bonusing. I'm not suggesting it's too much, but how do you get the calculation to double basically double the height of the building? Can you just help me walk through that a little bit to help me understand, please?
Ms. Wise?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is in relation to how the bonus for the affordable housing. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. So it's a general approach, and it is based on a lot of other elements. But the general approach is that it is 10% of the lift, which means the amount of units or height above what is permitted, that would be considered the lift, and then that would be about 10%, which is the 13 units that is being provided in this case.
Okay. Thank you. And thanks for noticing me.
Good. Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just a couple questions I have through you to staff as a follow-up from the public participation meeting. I know one of the comments was around rent geared income and why we don't look at that. And I would like to have staff respond, because when we talk about affordable housing, it really is a broad conversation. And for us to understand this application and how affordable housing works, I think it is important to understand the rent geared income and how it links into bonusing. And the other question I have through you is the question around landscaping. I know in the report it mentioned that it's temporary, but if staff could just make a comment around landscaping and what temporary means as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Wise, there's two questions there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might just sort of take the easier one first regarding landscape open space. So this is a high intensity zone, the business district commercial zone. It doesn't have a minimum requirement for landscape open space because it has a very high allowance for building footprints, building coverage. So in this case, there is a little bit of parking that is located at 701 Dundas Street, and that is not consistent with the approved development agreement. So that will be removed. The hardscaping will be removed and it'll be sod, and that will be a temporary landscaped open spaced area until a building is developed there. There's also a 5th floor landscaped amenity area for residents to access. So there is some amenity space available. It's just not on the ground in perpetuity for this site. With regards to the rent geared to income, this may be a bit new for bonusing. We have taken the recommendation from our Housing Development Corporation, which is for a certain number of units to tie in for the next 30 years. But I also noticed that there was the inclusionary zoning as consent item on this agenda, and I'm wondering if part of the rest of the affordable housing toolkit, perhaps Mr. Barrett may have some additional comments for that.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Sorry, through the chair, the inclusionary zoning, we're just starting on that process right now, so that those tools are not yet available. I believe that in Ms. Wise's opening presentation, though, she talked about right now bonusing is the tool that we have at our disposal to deal with the affordable housing. I'm not too sure what else I can add to the conversation.
Nope, that's fine. Thanks, Mr. Barrett. So, Councillor Hopkins, did you have other questions? We'll go to give you a chance for comments after, but questions?
Yeah, no, I think it is an important conversation that we understand as we move forward with inclusionary zoning, that those will be opportunities as well. We're not right there yet, but I really want to thank staff for their comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions at this time? All right, I'll open it up to the committee for comments or and any motion that you might wish to make. Councillor Hopkins, you're leading tonight. I don't know what was. Pretty quiet. Go ahead.
I'm going to go for it. I know the ward councillor is here, and I'm very interested in hearing his comments. But for now, I really appreciate the community's comments. I think we heard loud and clear that the community has still some concerns that are outstanding. And I know Old East Village is still planning on working with Medallion, but for me, this is a development. This is where compact development should happen, is down in the core area of our city. And I think this is where it should happen. Regenerating Old East Village is something that is important as well. How we do that, how we do the parking was a big question mark for me. I want to thank the applicant for working with staff. Here there have been a number of changes, and I want to thank him for that. I think the parking still kind of is a question mark, but I could see the applicant wanting to take into account some of the challenges and concerns. I would like to make a suggestion, though, that, and I heard this more from the Unity project, but it's something that we've also received comments about safety and how it's all going to work through the site plan process. And I would like to give the community an opportunity to continue to give comments through a public participation meeting through the site plan. So I would like, after I hear everyone's comments, make that suggestion that we put in a holding provision to allow the public to go through the site plan. We heard about the concerns around the garbage, the maintenance. I also heard from the applicant the willingness there to work with the community. But for me, it just gives that assurance, given the outstanding questions, around connectivity, the safety of the environment, things like that. Or there could be still opportunities through that site plan to work with the community. So with that, I'm
Thank
really
you.
supportive. Thank you.
Mayor Holder, I saw you this time, and you're hopefully ready to go.
I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis. Before I go to further comments, is Councillor Helmer on the line? All right, Councillor Helmer, why don't you go ahead now?
Thank you. Appreciate everyone making time to weigh in on the development proposal. As you can see from the comments that came in the written documents and from what people have said tonight, the proposal is happening in a neighborhood where there's a lot of very smart people who are pretty well informed about urban design and planning issues, and you've got lots of good feedback. I think what we're seeing from the developer is, modifications to make the building and the proposal fit better with the expectations that were raised by the community. People in this area really want to see well-designed buildings that are going to work in the neighborhood. And I think what we're also seeing is that not everybody is going to be happy with any particular proposal, and there's some strengths and some weaknesses. There's definitely some frustrations that have come up that are really, as Jen Pistorius from the BIA mentioned, not directly related to the development proposal and not really relevant for a zoning issue, like issues around maintenance, operations of the existing buildings, some pieces like that. I think it was important that they get raised, but they're not really related to how tall should this building be and how many units could there be, and should there be commercial on the ground floor and how much parking should be there. So in terms of the parking, I do want to say I think this will alleviate some of the problem. Part of the problem is that there are 3 towers existing with not enough underground and structured parking for what they have now. So what's happened is that a number of buildings in the neighborhood have been demolished to make way for surface parking lots to accommodate even more residential parking on the surface. That is not good, and we need to get some more underground parking and structured parking in this particular development proposal to take a little bit of the pressure off from what is this sort of under parking of the other 3 buildings. So this will help. I don't think it's going to fully resolve the problem perhaps, but it's going to take some pressure off, and we certainly can't have more demolitions of single family housing, some of it relatively affordable, to make way for more surface parking. Similarly, we really need to get the parking that was encroaching up onto Dundas Street directly back off of the street, because we don't want to have surface parking right up to the roadway either. What we need up against the roadway are buildings and not parking. So, I think the development proposal overall is quite good. I think the design is good with the podium and the big step back from that sort of 6-story podium to the taller tower. I think the location of the tower is really important in terms of how it's going to relate to the rest of the neighborhood. And so pushing it back from Dundas Street as much as possible, I think is a really good step. I know in terms of the affordable housing piece that lots of folks who want to see more affordable housing, but I'd like to see more affordability, like deeper affordability, or more units. And I just want to say on that front that it wasn't that long ago that we were getting 0 below market units in major developments like this. In fact, in the other medallion buildings, there were none. And this is a good step forward in terms of creating some below market. I won't go so far to call it affordable, but it's below market housing that's going to help some folks who are trying to get into housing that they can afford. It's certainly not the rent geared to income housing that we have in our own social housing or in many of the co-ops around town, even just down the street. But just across the street from this development is 72 units being built by Indwell, and those rents are much, much lower than 80% of average market. And there's a 42 unit building that just went up and is operating now just down the street further on Dundas. So not everything has to happen in the same building, and I think that this is a good step forward. I like the idea that the units could be provided in some of the existing buildings, because in terms of meeting the urgent need that's out there now, I think sooner is better. So, I'm supportive of the proposal. I do think having the public site plan is good, but I think that would be required for this kind of development anyway. So I'm not sure that we have to have a motion like that at a committee. And I would say that overall, I think people are very positive about the development proposal. They're just making sure that operations and the actual execution of the building is done extremely well, because they want to see this kind of intensity work well in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lehman?
Thank you. I'm glad to hear Councillor Helmer's view on what I think is a very important development in the Old East Village. I've seen that the developer has listened to concerns, has addressed the setback. And I think also the actual L design of the building is preventing from the look of a wall right up on Dundas Street. The design looks good for me. My concern, reading through comments and whatnot, was parking. I was glad to hear from the BIA as they addressed, from a commercial standpoint, what they thought about parking. I still think that the parking, even with the increase, is going to be rapidly increased from the lack of the parking available in the other two apartments. This is an opportunity to add really good looking commercial space in the Old East right on Dundas. And I want to see those occupants of those spaces succeed. And I want opportunities for people outside of this area to discover the Old East Village and to come down and shop and partake of the restaurants and other services, goods and services that will be provided. I'm a little concerned that there will be enough parking for those people coming from outside, because they might be used up just from the other two apartments around. So that's my only comment and caution. I hope that the parking access will be evident from the street and from those not familiar to the area, so they can get down and enjoy this new revitalization of Dundas Street. But overall, I am supportive of this project.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chair. Again, I appreciate hearing Councillor Helmer's thoughts. It's his ward, and that always carries a lot of weight with me to hear from the ward councillor. Likewise, I do recognize, and to echo Councillor Helmer, no, this building isn't going to solve the affordable housing need in the city. No one building will do that. But there are other locations, including the Inwell project immediately adjacent, that will address some more deeply affordable needs, and we'll continue to work on that. We are making progress. So I think that, and hearing from the proponent that, this is the fourth iteration to come forward, and that there's been a lot of work with staff back and forth, and listening to the community input. And I will also thank the OEV BIA for making sure that that community input was heard. It just makes sense that we move forward with this decision today, and of course the conversation will continue as the site plan gets developed.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst, I saw your hand up there. Go ahead. Yes,
just briefly, I like what I see. I very much appreciate the amount of work and collaboration that the proponents have done. I also see some opportunities here, perhaps for some public art, which would be great. So I'm in support as well. Thank you for the committee for your great consideration of this.
Thank you, Councillor, and your garden looks great. Councillor Hopkins, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I know I've made my comments already, but I just want to thank Councillor Helmer for his comments. I did appreciate what he had to say and the support that he has. It's obvious there's a lot of good things happening in Old East, and this is one of them. I would like to follow up with the opportunity for the public to be part of a public participation meeting through the site plan. I just want to confirm that.
Right, I was going to ask staff about the site plan meeting and public participation in that. I think we're just looking for confirmation that that will happen. Mr. Yeoman, go ahead.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. So a public site plan could be introduced here through an H5. However, I would caution the committee that this is a bonus site, so the parameters of the development are essentially locked in with the approval that's before you tonight. There are a number of matters that have been raised by the committee, and staff have definitely been making some very good notes about those things to be taken forward through the site plan review process. Perhaps rather than a public site plan, it could be recommended that there are matters for consideration for the approval authority that were considered and commented on through this process. That might be another alternative that committee could consider.
Is that a motion you would be interested in making, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, I would, given that we've heard that this is the last opportunity for the public to make comments. And we heard from a number of from the public about some of the concerns that still remain. So if I could put forward that staff take into account the concerns that were expressed, and I don't have it prepared.
No, not to interrupt you, but I've just been advised by the clerk that has actually been incorporated into the motion, the comments that will be going to the approval authority. So I think it's covered, but I'll let you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the public is aware of that, and encourage the applicant and the public to continue with this development.
All right. Just a moment. We're just waiting on the clerk. We're just preparing the motion, so it'll just take a few moments. Just have to bear with us. We're working up the wording, and it'll be available shortly. Are we ready for something? All right, so I think, Councillor Hopkins, the motion's been moved and seconded. Is there anybody, first of all, who wants to make any other comments before we put up the motion? All right, so we're going to bring the motion up so committee can look at it, and I understand it contains a direction that the approving authority consider the public comments.
Chair, I'm prepared to amend my motion accordingly.
You're moving this motion that's on the screen, I take it, Mr. Mayor?
I am so.
Yeah, and Councillor Lewis is still seconding it. I think it was just some further detail. And it is available now. I'm hoping committee members will see it.
And thank you, Councillor Hopkins, as well.
All right, is everyone seeing the wording? No, Councillor Hopkins hasn't seen it yet. I'm seeing it, but I don't know how.
Mr. Chair.
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
There may be problems scrolling down the screen. It is the staff recommendation, and in addition, we have wording asking the approval authority to consider the comments provided at the public participation meeting, including such matters as, but not limited to, garbage, parking, and affordable housing. We will review the tape of this meeting and ensure that the final recommendation on the report contains all of the comments provided.
All right, I take it that for committee, it's safe to vote on that, and it'll be wordsmithed. I can't believe I used that word for council. So are there no other comments? I will call the question.
Councillor Hopkins?
such a long motion that I can't get to the buttons at the end, so I vote yay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much, committee, and thank you to staff and particularly Ms. Wise for your presentation and being able to answer all the questions so completely. Well, we have one item for direction, which is a request for an amendment to the Hamilton Road Business Improvement Area bylaws to allow for a change in the board of directors. Subject to any questions or comments, I did ask legal if there was any difficulty with this at the pre-meeting, and they indicated they did not have any concerns with this change. So I'll turn it over to committee for any questions or motions. There's actually a motion on screen now. Oh, Councillor Van Holst, and then Councillor, I'm going to go to Councillor Lehman first, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Van Holst. Councillor Lehman?
Yeah, I was just going to make a motion to approve this.
First, is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis, and now I'll go to Councillor Van Holst. He's the ward councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I appreciate your support on this item. It just provides some flexibility for the BIA on which I sit, and having the one specific number of 12 doesn't really provide a benefit, whereas allowing to have a flexible number of members allows us to move forward in numerous situations. So we thank you for that support.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? There being none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
There are no deferred matters or additional business to my knowledge, so we'll move on to adjournment. I just need a mover and seconder. Moved with 2 hands by Councillor Lewis. Do I have a seconder? Or are they going to make us stay here all night? Oh, it's Councillor Lehman seconding. Just a hand vote, all in favor? All hands on screen are up, and all hands here are up. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.